In this tribe, the hair was cut in a special style when a boy reached adolescence.
Josie, don't bother George.
You almost finished with that report, George?
Yeah, just about.
He's reading about Indian boys, adolescents like him.
Why don't you grow up?
Grow up? I'm just as grown up as you are, even if you are older.
Says who?
Mrs. Baker. She said that girls mature about a year earlier than boys.
I suppose if she said you were a genius, you'd believe her.
Yes, I would.
Now, George, I think Josie is right in believing Mrs. Baker. She's a lovely person and a very good teacher.
All the kids at school like her.
Hey, Dad, here's something for my report.
Oh, what's that, George?
Only the grown people have clothes on.
Say, Mom, can I wear this skirt tomorrow?
Yes, Josie. I've almost finished hemming it.
It says here that until they were 12 or 13 years old, the children wore no clothes at all. The wearing of loincloths and skirts was considered a sign of sexual maturity.
Well, that's interesting, George. And it ties in with the film Josie was telling us about.
Sure does. We saw that film last year.
I'm on the preview committee, Dad. I'm going to tell the class what to look for in the film.
Well, have you decided what you're going to say?
I'm going to tell them that the most important things to look for are the changes that take place in our bodies and feelings when we grow up.
Grow up?
That is, when we become adolescents.
We've used that word adolescent before. Who can tell us what it means? Dorothy?
Well, it's boys and girls just beginning to mature. It happens when they're about our age.
That's right, Dorothy. Are there any other points from the preview committee?
Yes, Mrs. Baker. Warren has a list of questions we'd like to project for the class to see.
That's good. Go right ahead, Warren. John, would you put out the front lights, please?
When does human growth begin? How much does one grow before birth? Do boys and girls grow at the same rate? What are the main growth changes that occur during childhood and adolescence?
The committee did very well. The film we'll see this morning will give the answers to these questions. It will also show the earliest phases of growth, as well as the changes that take place during childhood and adolescence. It will help you to understand the way the cycle of human growth is repeated over and over from generation to generation. And now we're ready for the film. Lights.
Growth is controlled by tiny organs called glands within our bodies. One of the most important of these is the pituitary gland located in the head. It secretes chemicals into our blood. The chemicals are called hormones, and they regulate body growth. The pituitary hormone influences the secretions of other glands, notably the testes and ovaries, located in the pelvic region of the body. The testes secrete the male sex hormone, and the ovaries the female sex hormone. Presence of these hormones in the blood brings about many changes in the bodies of both boys and girls. And in the way they feel and act, too. For boys, hair begins to grow on the face. For both boys and girls, hair grows under the arms, in the pubic region, and elsewhere on the body. The breasts of the girl begin to develop. The vocal cords of both boys and girls get larger and their voices deepen. These physical changes make the boy feel more manly and the girl more womanly. Both feel independent. They begin to be interested in members of the other sex, in social activities, and in being together. These are normal feelings. When a boy is between the ages of 13 and 16, the testes begin to produce sperm cells. These sperm cells are carried through the tubes in a thick, colorless liquid called semen, and at certain times are expelled through the penis. This happens during mating and sometimes during dreams in sleep. This is a normal function of the body. In addition to the ovaries, the sex organs of the girl consist of the tubes, the uterus, and the vagina. When a girl is between the ages of 12 and 15, the ovaries begin to produce ova, or egg cells. About once every month, an ovum ripens and leaves the ovary, moving into the tube. While the ovum moves slowly along the tube, the uterus becomes richly supplied with blood to nourish the egg. But if the ovum doesn't meet a sperm cell, it fails to grow and is discharged. Some days later, the uterus sheds its lining and a little blood passes from the body. The bleeding decreases and in a few days stops completely. This process is called menstruation. The whole cycle begins again with another ovum ripening, usually in the opposite ovary. During early adolescence, the menstrual cycle may be quite irregular. It usually takes a year or two for a rhythm to become established. These functions begin as we attain sexual maturity. But all of us do not mature at the same age. These boys and girls, for example, are all 13 years old, yet among them we see many differences in size and maturity. These differences and the fact that girls usually mature earlier than boys, both physically and emotionally, sometimes create problems. But by the time boys and girls reach their late teens, these problems will have been solved. Also, by the time they have completed their education, have steady jobs, want to get married, and are ready to accept the responsibility of having and raising children, the differences in sexual maturity will have disappeared.
Lights, please. The principles of growth and development we've seen in this film apply to all human beings. Now let's begin our discussion by answering the first question from the preview committee. Who can tell us when human growth begins? Bill?
Growth begins when a sperm cell enters an egg cell.
Suppose the sperm cell doesn't enter the egg cell.
Then the egg isn't fertilized and it dies in a few days.
That's correct, Bill. Steve, do you have a question?
Well, it's sort of a silly question, but I was wondering why there's so many sperm cells and only one egg cell.
That's a very good question, Steve. Let's use the projector to explain it. Now, in the first place, remember that the male sperm cells are being produced all the time, while only one egg cell is produced each month. That's one reason there are so many more sperm cells than egg cells. Then see what would happen if there were only one or a few sperm cells. The ovum is produced here and moves into the tube. The sperm cell has to travel all the way up here to find the ovum. And if there weren't ovum meeting a sperm cell, would be small. Lights, please. Does that answer your question, Steve?
Yes, Mrs. Baker.
Are there other questions? Julie?
About menstruation, is it really normal for the body to bleed like that?
Completely normal, Julie. Remember in the animated film, the lining of the uterus became filled with blood with which to nourish the fertilized ovum. Well, when the ovum is not fertilized, there's no need for this nourishment. So the uterus merely sheds its inner lining, and naturally a little blood leaves the body at the same time.
Oh, I see.
Now for the questions the rest of you have. Carolyn?
Do boys have anything like menstruation?
I heard my mother tell a neighbor I was born cesarean. What does that mean?
Why don't all people have red hair?
What happens if more than one sperm cell enters an egg?
How long will it take till my voice changes? Are girls always bigger than boys at 12 or 13?
Why do some kids grow faster than others?
All of those are excellent questions. You students who've been watching this film, you've heard the questions we're going to discuss. You can discuss these same questions with your teacher, and you can ask any others you have in mind.
Death. Out of the slime and darkness it comes to inflict its life-destroying poison on the careless, the unwary, the unprotected. No sane person would deliberately expose himself to its. No intelligent person would venture with distance of its fangs. Yet to young people are flirting with a poison every bit as deadly as that of the snake. To John, it seems perfectly natural and innocent to bump into an old classmate. He hasn't seen Pete since he dropped out of school last year. From the looks of him, he seems to be doing well on his out-of-town selling job. What John doesn't know is the selling job is pushing dope, and the long absence from town was spent in the state prison. Their accidental meeting calls for a little celebration, and Pete has just the thing. There's a little private party going on tonight, plenty of fun and laughs. Take a break from the books and live a little. It sounds good, but today's his father's day off, and John needs his help with some school problems. If there's another party sometime, maybe he can make it then. But Pete isn't interested in sometime, maybe, or squares. If you want to swing, call him. Right now, he's got to split. He's got to find fish ready to be hooked. Victims to supply him with money for the heroin he needs today and tomorrow and tomorrow. Compared to Pete's problems, John's are nothing. Poor grades, expulsion from the team, the frustrations and responsibilities of growing up seem important only to himself. All he needs is a little help, a little guidance, a little understanding. But the help, the guidance, the understanding are not there when he needs it. His parents are away just when he was counting on them to be home. His problems must wait for tomorrow, or he can solve them tonight alone. Only he can go just so far alone. During his childhood, he was loved, helped, protected. Suddenly, that's all gone. Now he's in a man's body, he's expected to be a man, to stand alone on his own 2 feet. This he will gladly do, but he needs a little push. He needs someone to help him over the hump of schoolwork that's troubling him. Today, he's had it. The studies can wait until tomorrow. He knows he can finish them then. What he doesn't know is behavior habits